Good evening. Happy Monday, everyone. This is a book review of the book Too Much and Never Enough by Mary L. Trump. And as most of you know, because I posted about this already, that this book was my very first foray into audiobooks. I had never engaged with an audio. Do you still call it reading when it's audiobook? I've never read an audiobook before this book, but my physical copy was back ordered by Amazon, so I decided to do the audiobook because I didn't want to wait till August to read this one. And so I joined Audible and I got 2 free credits, so I actually got this book for free. And I have to say that I really enjoyed the audiobook format. I don't think that it will ever take the place of physical books for me, because as I was explaining to someone on Facebook last week, I really like holding a physical book, turning the pages, interacting with it, going back to reread, and also having something to hold when I'm out and about that's not my phone. I like reading if I have to wait in line somewhere, or if I'm at the doctor's office, or if I'm waiting in the car for someone to get done. I like to be able to read. So I made some notes while I was reading because I didn't want to forget to address anything in Too Much and Never Enough. First of all, I really enjoyed Mary L. Trump's voice, her tone of voice. She actually narrates the book, and Ryan, who is more of an audiobook veteran than I am, said that that's not always the case. The author does not always narrate the book, but I'm really glad she narrated it. It lent it that much more credence and realism, and she just has a really eloquent, intelligent voice. Her voice is very soothing as well. So listening to the audiobook at night, right before I fell asleep, and it was also nice to be able to listen to it on a bike ride and while I was running on the treadmill. Instead of having to choose between reading or activity, I was able to do both at the same time. So that was really, really cool. The fact that she is a clinical psychologist really also lent a lot of credence to the, claims, alleged, occurrences in the book, however you want to word that. I felt like her clinical observations really hit home and made me feel like, okay, she's not, this is not a disgruntled family member just, trying to badmouth her relative. No, not at all. She definitely sort of dug into the psyche of what and how our 45th president of the United States was created. A lot of reviews that I've read about this book says that it makes the reader more sympathetic and empathetic to Donald Trump. Now, I can see where that opinion would come from, but for me personally, that's not how I left this book. It was interesting and kind of sad to hear about his childhood, especially how his mother was very ill when he was young and when he was a young child, and he just didn't develop that closeness with her and sort of started acting out for attention, and the acting out was then never corrected, and it just got worse and worse. And then it got to a point where his father encouraged it, and the rest is history. So he was encouraged to be a bully by not being discouraged from being a bully. But then later in life, his father actually encouraged his, being a bully. And Donald and also his father saw, any show of emotion or backing down or admitting mistakes as weakness, which that sort of, that toxic masculinity, and if that's brought into your life at a very young age, and it's really hard to overcome that. I loved finding out that he was not only bankrupt 3 times, which is what I thought, but he actually went bankrupt 5 times because I'll admit that back in the day, I did read The Art of the Deal, his book from, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s. I can't remember exactly when he wrote it, maybe early 90s actually, but I didn't read it until the early 2000s. Because at the time, his persona was that of a successful, self-made businessman, and finding out, he was neither successful or self-made, because everything he had, he got from his father. And even when he was going through his bankruptcies and really struggling in the business, his father just kept throwing money, because to admit that Donald had not succeeded would also, in a way, be admitting that Fred Trump, his father, had not succeeded either. I had been under the impression that his older brother Freddie committed suicide. I'm not sure where I got that from. I think maybe I was getting Trumps mixed up with the Gettys. I think one of the older Getty sons from John Paul Getty's family actually committed suicide, but I was thinking that Freddie Trump committed suicide, but he did not. He died of what was probably complications from alcoholism and like heart problems when he was like 42 or 43. And it was very sad, especially because Freddie Trump was Mary L. Trump's father. So hearing her talk about just his poor treatment by the entire family, but especially his father, and just being forced to give up his dream of being a pilot and give up his dreams of being able to engage in things that he really enjoyed doing, because his father really looked down upon hobbies and frivolous outings, and just believed in work and making money. And I could definitely hear the sorrow in Mary's voice when she talked about her father passing away when she was 16, and she hadn't been able to say goodbye to him before she went to boarding school. And then like a week later, he had died. That was really sad. And then also, it was interesting to hear about Fred Trump's, the father's, dementia setting in, and how that sort of changed the dynamic between the father and the sons. And they became, of course, more disrespectful of him because his power was gone, and no one was actually very empathetic to his condition. But oddly enough, Fred Trump, once he had dementia, was a little more empathetic to others. And Mary says that he started calling her the nice lady versus villainizing her and her mother as he had previous to his dementia, and thinking that her mother was a gold digger and that, she was nothing, and he was always sort of nasty to her. But it was interesting that she said even though he forgot almost everybody in the family, he never forgot Donald. That I found very interesting. And, Alzheimer's or dementia, it works in very mysterious ways, but that was a very poignant line and just point in the book, I thought. Once Mary revealed that I had done no research on Mary Trump before reading this book. So once she revealed that she's a lesbian and had been engaged to a woman, but kind of hid that from her family, I was like, no wonder she's so fearless, and he was not able to intimidate her into not publishing the book. And it also explains her intelligence and her eloquence. Nice. Glad to know she's family. Hearing about how and there are spoiler alerts in here. If you haven't read this book, you might not want to listen to this review because I kind of go into some detail here. But the part where the family was bullying Mary and her brother to try to get them to sign this will, that the will had been sort of doctored to sort of cheat them out of their inheritance that should have come to them via their father's inheritance, was just really tough to listen to, especially when the bullying devolved into the family cutting off the health insurance for Mary and her brother Fritz. And her brother Fritz had a young child who had serious medical issues, and they were really dependent upon the health insurance. And for them to cut that off in order to bully Mary and Fritz into signing this very unfair will was just like, wow. That's one of the moments where I was running on the treadmill and I was like, I had to stop, wow, really? I just the cruelty of some people just really, wow. And I've seen and kind of been through a lot, but I was just like, wow, that's really, really low. And the fact that they didn't even mention Freddie in the grandmother's obituary, I was like, damn, wow, you totally just erased Freddie, the oldest son, because he wasn't what Fred Trump wanted him to be. You just erased him. You completely erased him from the family. That was just, I was flabbergasted by that. I can't even wrap my head around it. And I get it. Money, changes people. People who are obsessed with money, they can be that way, to the detriment of everything else. But wow, that was just, I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it, but it happened. I believe it's true, but I can't believe it. And just in her summation, she uses words like desperate and craven, and she says plainly what we all know, that the people who are propping up Donald Trump are doing so because their survival and their success depends on his. They know that he's unfit. They know that he's, a malignant narcissist, and that he's just really, as evidenced by, having to pay someone to take his SATs, just really not the most intelligent person, especially not to be running the free world. So it's just scary that people are aware, but they're just in it for their own self-interest. So they are just like propping him up, and he's just obviously very disturbed. She says everything is transactional for this poor, broken human being. And that was really poignant to me as well. That basically says it all. I mean, some of the things she described from childhood about how he would get upset and cross his arms and pout whenever someone would bring up the mashed potato incident where his older brother Freddie had dumped a bowl of mashed potatoes on his head when Donald was younger, because Donald was being such a brat. That, we see that, like when the nurse brought up about the lack of PPE in the press conference, and he immediately, it was so crazy to see, like, the president of the United States acting less mature than Sebastian. It was very strange. And that Donald Trump thinks that empathy equals weakness, which that's obvious, right? If you got children locked up in cages, obviously you're not very empathetic, and you don't want to show empathy. And, even though there's millions of people dying from COVID, you're, continuing to divide the nation and encouraging your followers to not wear masks and not take care of themselves. And that definitely shows a lack of empathy. She says that his ignorance overwhelms his ability to do anything, basically, and that he is plagued by a toxic positivity. I really like that term, phrase, what have you. I really like that, because the other day when he was quoted in the press as saying about the COVID numbers, well, I'll be right eventually. That's definitely toxic positivity. You're not willing to do anything now about, all the people that are dying, but you're just waiting to be right, because eventually you think, herd immunity will happen, or that people will stop dying, or that we'll find a vaccine. So yeah, and just seeing how those traits were handed down by his father, and that he's been emulating his father his entire adult life by, pretending that everything's great and not wanting to admit to weakness or being wrong or failure. It was very, very insightful. And I'm definitely not more empathetic to Donald Trump because of the book, but I feel like I have more insight, and that things make more sense now. And that it's always pretty amazing to me how our childhoods and our upbringing, nature and nurture, just really figure into our entire lives. And, there's this, whatever he is, 70-something-year-old man who's still emulating his father. It's just it blows my mind. But Too Much and Never Enough by Mary L. Trump. Very, very good book. If you haven't read it, you should. Everybody should read it, actually, just to, you can formulate your own opinions afterwards, but it definitely comes off as very honest and very well researched, in my opinion. And I give it 5 stars out of a possible 5. I think it's really, really good. And I will probably even reread it once the actual book comes. So there you have it. #bibliophile.